Hello, Sean here, Mountains Garage in the beautiful state of Maine. Today I'm working again on my 64 Dodge Dart GT Turbo LS Power Glide 9-inch Ford project. In the last video, I believe I finished up welding on the new subframe connectors I built. And the next thing on the list that I have been kind of dreading is removing the old rear shackle mount that when they moved the springs inboard, instead of going through the frame, which would be normal in the back, they welded it on the bottom of the frame. It was the 70s, and probably the higher you jacked at the rear end, the cooler you were. Either way, I wanted to put it back where it belongs. I was semi-impressed. You've seen the welding if you've been following along on the rest of the car. Whoever welded the rear shackle tubes on that I was hoping to reuse did a really good job. It took me quite a while to get them cut off, ground down, and then I had to fabricate. I doubled the thickness of the subframe back there just like I did in the front. So again, those little brackets don't take up a lot. They don't weigh a whole lot, but they sure do a lot of good to a car that's just made out of sheet metal. So essentially doubling the thickness, catching the tube on both sides, welding at 360 plus welding all the way around the subframe and back to where the leaf spring used to bolt on in the rear. So that's super strong. And it all came out pretty well. I was trying to rush, I believe I mentioned it. I'm shooting obviously the intro after I've done most of the work. I had called on Tuesday because I was almost out of C25 gas, argon, CO2 mix, and they deliver to Standish, where I live, on Thursday. So I wanted to get it all done and get all the goodness out of that bottle because I'm thrifty. I can't stand turning it in with some left, and there's always a little bit left because if you actually ran out, you'd booger up a weld when that happens. So I ran it down to when you turn the valve on, the gauge didn't move. I do know from experience with the big bottle, when I built my trailer a long time ago, I had both frame rails laid on the ground, and I welded all the D-rings on both sides with a gauge that didn't read anything, expecting to run out, and I never did. So I don't know how much further I could have gone. It's kind of like the episode of Seinfeld where Kramer's trying to run the car out of gas. You just don't know how far you can go unless you try. But I was satisfied. I got most of the stuff out, and the guy just dropped off a new bottle, so now I'm good to go for a while. But go ahead and watch the video. I'll stop talking, and I'll catch you up when I get back, or you get back, or we get back together. I decided to go ahead and press the bushings out of the springs because I had a few minutes. It's only semi-scary. It actually works pretty good. Old bushings out. The new aluminum bushings tap right in. They gave me two sizes. I'm operating without instructions, but they're very similar to the Caltrax, so it's not a big deal. The inner pin wouldn't fit this bushing even on the bench before I put it in the spring eye on either one. I got it through one of them, I think, so little inconsistencies, so I polished the pin in the lathe with some emery paper and had to break out the brake cylinder hone, broke my hone, had a spare, but now they fit with potentially some grease clearance because you got to grease them up one time and you put it together. And I had transferred the rear bushings because they're not quite poly, but they're not like the cheap rubber ones that I have a box of those too. I have 8 poly bushings, but they don't fit. I may try to make them fit the frame rail, but that's the next job, I think. Now this chore is done. The springs are ready to go. I need to cut off the rear perches and fix all that back there. I went ahead and assembled the Caltrax and hung the springs in the car. Like anything else, I've said it before, there's no such thing as a bolt-on part, and I'll say it again. The front of the spring is a little wide right there, so this one will operate without rubbing. I added a piece of 3/4 heater hose on this pin. This is what applies the pressure on the leaf spring. just so it's quieter. If you were racing, it wouldn't matter, but whereas I'm going to drive it all the time, I don't want to hear that thing clunking if it ever hits while driving. I went ahead and greased up the inside. There's a shim that goes between here and here, so the pocket's full. Oh, you can see them right there. There's big washers, but it holds the center pin in, the one I had to polish in the lathe, and of course I greased up the aluminum bushing. And that's final. In my bucket of parts that came with this car, there was brand new grade 8 bolts and lock nuts, so when I think I'm at the point of not having to take it apart again, I'll tighten all this stuff up, because that's still loose too. So, but yeah, I got the grease fitting pointing down. I think we're good. The next project is to cut these off and relocate them up there. And I wanted to cut out this whole section of trunk floor so I can just sawzall across there, because that's going to be the most efficient way to get that off and probably save it. But for now, I can't let the car down. I was going to cut the trunk from the top because that front stand has quite a bit of weight on it because the car is nose heavy on the lift. So I'm just going to whack the side of this out, and I'll be able to get in there with my Sawzall and cut that off, see if I can save that piece of tubing. And when I think I'm done under here, everything's going to get painted black, so if you were worried about that naked piece, which I know you were, it'll get painted along with the bolt. And normally I would put a washer on the bolt just because I can't help myself, but I just welded essentially a washer on both sides, so I let myself have a pass on that one. Because wrestling this leaf spring up there with the shims was hot enough. That is the debris field from cutting off the shackle mounts off the bottom of the frame. I was not able to save them. Whoever welded those on underneath the frame did a much better job. Now I have bored out the holes in the frame, which wasn't a whole lot of fun. Hanging onto a 1-inch drill bit was a challenge. And then I had to grind a little bigger because it's like 1 inch 50 thousandths a piece of tubing that I came up with that fits my stock bushings perfectly. I was going to use the poly bushings, but that would have required a much larger piece of tubing, and it doesn't fit the actual hanger very well. So now I'm going to make plates to bolt in where the rear leaf spring mount used to be, shackle mount used to be, to come around this way and then go under the frame and up on the other side, doubling everything just like I did in the front. Just trying to make the sheet metal a little bit stronger. I'm not adding very much weight. By the time you make a small plate, it really doesn't weigh much. So, and the strength it provides has to help. I've been pushing myself to get this done before Thursday morning. My C25 argon CO2 mix on my MIG welder is almost empty, and I'm so thrifty, I want to make sure I use it all. So before I give up a bottle that still had some goodness in it, I'm hoping to extract it all this afternoon. All right, both sides welded in. Welded wall on each side. I ground down where the bushing's gonna go. Time for a little paint. Painted and bushings installed. If you can see that one, yep. I put one leaf spring up in place. That's exactly how it used to hang before. Loaded on the ground. It's back here, which is perfect. And finally, when you think you're gonna swap a rear end, you get around to the somewhat fun stuff. Of course, I have to clean where the perches are gonna be welded on, get it up in place, mock everything up. I'm gonna go ahead and build the drive shaft so I can measure for proper pinion angle, and then tack the spring perches in place, take it back out and weld it. Not exactly done yet, but we're gaining. And a few hours later, I have everything mocked up. I have to give a shout out to the no-name eBay Calvert copies of the traction bar devices, other than having to hone the front leaf spring bushing so the pin would travel easily. These things bolted right on. Right now I have, when I put left and right hand rod ends together, I like to thread them all in and then I'll back it out where it needs to be. In this case, the rocker just moves, so the rod ends are in tight on both ends. I had 9-inch 3 1/4 ID 1/2-inch thread Calvert brand U-bolts, and they're too long to run without the 1-inch block I have installed. And actually, if I can pull this off, I like the looks of it better, and it saves me $50, which is the price of another set of U-bolts. So I'm going to attempt, tire clearance notwithstanding, to run the car a little bit lower, because let's face it, the old Mopars kind of sit high in the rear. Now, centering it side to side when you're swapping the rear end, I've covered this with the Nova. The Nova I had to offset to one side because the bodies aren't welded straight. I got to give Mopar credit, and I'm using this high-tech, probably developed in the 60s, block of wood on both sides. I just, shove it up in there to center my rear end, and it actually worked out that it fits the wheel wells the same on both sides. So side to side, I'm pretty good. I have the U-bolts snugged up. Pinion angle I won't know until I get it on the ground, which is the next step. I need to clean that bench off, get rid of it so I can put the car down on jack stands and measure for a drive shaft. I measured it in full droop, and I'm 59.5 inches center to center on the U-joints. So I like to see how much that changes up to ride height. The new spring that's on the right rear, if you're just catching up, this is actually the driver's side left-hand super stock spring. I had super stock springs, and the right side has such an arch to it, and it's so much heavier that the car sits an inch to the left, and you don't need that with the Caltrax. So sticking with the budget, I went and bought a $130 new Mopar super stock spring, and it does have a 1/4 inch more of an arch, probably because it's new, than the semi-used one. I mean, this one still has stickers on it, but it's been holding the car up for quite a while, so I assume those will equal out, but I can live with a 1/4 inch difference. This is a Curry brand housing and axles that I picked up on a trade. I don't remember if it came with the brakes or not, but it has new big Ford style ends that take the 3/8. These are T-bolts. But I had it all set up in the shed for about 3 years, and I had already mocked up the brake line and stuff, which is actually going to work out just fine. I had the brake lines on it and everything, and it actually worked out pretty well. I did not have to come up with anything that didn't come in the kit. The Calvert duplicate, eBay, no name brand traction bar setup, all the shock mounts, the bushings, all that stuff. There's no instructions, but it's, not hard to figure out where everything goes, especially because I actually have Calvert traction bars on the Nova that's 10 feet away. And I've closed up what used to be about a 4-inch gap above the tire to the top of the lip on the wheel opening to about 1.5 inches. We'll see how much that tucks up inside, and if I have any clearance issues later on this afternoon. And welcome back. I decided to come over here and sit inside my 49 Chevy pickup. Well, actually the cab's over there, but I'm on the seat. It's where I sit and critique my videos. In case you were wondering, that bottle of 75-25 Argon CO2 mix delivered to my house was $167. Well, slightly less, $166 and change. It's the biggest bottle they make. I get about 5 years out of them. I don't do that much MIG welding. When I do, it seems to be a lot, but I try to force myself to TIG weld everything, and I'm almost due for a bottle of Argon, but same deal. I want to get all of it out of there. But as expected, all the work you just saw took, well, 4 days. Everything takes longer than you expect. even just welding after I'd made all the brackets and everything, just for the shackle hangers on the back, I welded an hour and a half. So I'm excited to see it on the ground and measure for the drive shaft, which is next. In the next video, I need to build the drive shaft and set the pinion angle, tack the perches in place, and I got to take it all back apart and weld and paint and all that stuff. So almost done with the rear. That's exciting. Probably gonna segue right into roll cage. I mean, I've got my lathe set up with my end mill to notch with, and I've dragged out half the stuff to do it. I might as well just get it done. So that way I could, when I finally pull the engine out to actually build it and weld up the subframe and everything, it'll actually go together for good. So that's the plan for now, but it's springtime. I need to get a few other projects done. I should be driving the 71 Nova this summer. All I gotta do is put the interior together, at least do something for an interior. Even if I don't, have my ideal, I need a good back seat, stuff like that, all the panels and stuff like that. But while the windows are out of the 71 Nova, I want to put the headliner in, at least get that much done, work my way down, I guess. So, and this is March now, so mid-April, late April, the road should be pretty well removed of sand, depending on how the winter goes. The rest of the next few weeks of winter, they're pretty good here in Standish, doing some sweeping, getting that picked up. So, and in the end, it's just a driver anyway, so got to get over the newness of it. So thanks for watching. I'll catch you in a couple days, and we'll do some more stuff.